Hello, welcome back to the third episode of our Countdown to Christmas. It is the third part of A Woke Christmas Carol, and we don't have new art, so I'm reusing art from before. Um, so yeah, um, our we're gonna read stage three, the third part. We're gonna read the second of the three spiritual facilitators. Scrooge next awoke when his watch buzzed the hour. He peered around, but saw no spirits to pester him. Yet an eerie light suffused his bedchamber and inti- intimated that he might not be alone. The source of his light seemed to be in his living room, so Scrooge rose from his mat and walked to the door. He opened the door with his breath held fast and peeked in. What he saw astounded him. Instead of the usual postmodern grays and whites, the room seemed almost on fire with a profusion of warm, yellow light from the Yule log blazing in the hearth. The walls and ceiling were so richly festooned with garlands of holly, mistletoe, evergreen, and ivy that it was as if a rainforest, in all its diversity, had been transplanted there. Heaped up on the floor to form a type of throne were geese, game, brawn, great joints of meat, suckling pigs, long strings of sausages, mince pies, plum puddings, barrels of oysters, immense cakes, and steaming bowls of punch, all with enough empty calories and cholesterol to clog the veins of an entire peacekeeping force. At the sight of such an amount of food, the normally tempered Scrooge nearly swooned, half from ravenous and half from revulsion. In easy state upon this throne sat a jolly figure of greater than average stature, glorious to see, who bore in his hand a glowing torch, which he raised up high to shed light on Scrooge as he came peeping round the door. "Come in!" exclaimed the spirit. "Come in and know me better." Scrooge approached timidly and asked him not to wave the torch so near to the sprinklers in the ceiling. "Oh, lighten up a little," laughed the visitor. "Look upon me! I am the ghost of Christmas present. Let's party!" Scrooge raised his eyes as he was told. He was relieved to see the warm and jovial look in the spirit's bearded face. This spectator would apparently be less confrontational and insinuating than the last. The spirit was clothed in a simple yet generous cut green robe that hung loosely on his abundant frame. His dark brown curls were long and free as his unconstrained demeanor and joyful air. Then Scrooge noticed, standing behind the spirit, another figure who was more slight and sober in aspect than the other, though not unpleasant. "Who is your who is your companion?" Scrooge asked. "Oh, him? He's Rupert, my designated driver. Can you believe it? Ha!" The spirit rose and said, "Come on, touch my robe. Let's blow this taco stand." Scrooge did as he was told, and the room and everything in it vanished instantly. The next moment they stood in the humble dwelling of a family that existed in a lower percentile of socioeconomic strata. Despite their situation, the family members refused to play the victim and were chipper and merry in the delights of the season. Love and respect decorated their home as wonderfully as their flocked arboreal companion. The aromas of their dinner lingered welcomely as the family sat together on the couch watching It's a Wonderful Life on their flickering television. The spirit inspected the scene fondly, intently, then whistled at Rupert and jerked his thumb backward over his shoulder. Before Scrooge could blink his eye, he and his companion were transported to a more opulent residence owned by a member of the oppressing class. People were gathered for an intimate soiree, where they traded confidential and exclusionary information that further secured their privileged positions in society. Food and wine were laid out in abundance, and the guests feasted with little regard for the needs of the workers they exploited. But class warfare was far from their minds this night. The men and women were in grand high spirits as they sat around the entertainment center together, watching a laser disc recording of It's a Wonderful Life. Scrooge was struck by the genuine warmth the people displayed for one another, while he still respected each other's personal space. He had not felt such warmth for years, and at this moment was acutely aware of of its absence. "Spirit, why did you show me these images?" he finally asked. "Are you trying to show me how isolated I am from my fellow human persons?" I would like to note that human is spelled normally in these books, and I think that's strange. It's like man, and they're trying to be politically correct and feminist or whatever, but whatever, let's continue. How much I have sealed upon my heart from the rest of the world. How love is the common link for us all. Nah, said the spirit from the buffet table a short distance away. We're just here to raid the fridge. He walked back to Scrooge, munching on a large sandwich he had thrown together. The spirit motioned to the TV. You know, I walk in on people watching this movie just about all night, and I still have never seen the ending. Can you believe it? Huh, let's make like a baby and head out. And in the briefest of intervals, the three astral travelers landed at an apartment in the city. It was sparsely furnished yet tidy, and the television had been turned off. Thank a non-sectarian heaven, thought Scrooge. He could hear voices, a man's and a woman's, one of which was particularly familiar. I don't know, the woman said. Things just don't feel festive enough to me. Do you want to pop the fireplace log video in the VCR again? Asked the man. Bob Cratchit, Scrooge blurted out. Is this his house? And is this Mercedes, the person with whom he has a primary relationship? My word! The Cratchits continued their conversation, unaware of the presence of Scrooge or the spirits. Mercedes sighed. No, but it just doesn't feel as joyful and exciting these days as when I was a little girl. There are times when I wish I could stop being an atheist, if only for a little while. If only there were more holidays on the calendar for the deistically unencumbered. From the kitchen came the loud crash of a platter hitting the floor. Scrooge looked in the direction of the noise and saw the big boned spirit of Christmas present emerge, carrying a turkey leg and wearing a comically innocent expression. Roberto ran into the kitchen to investigate. Must have been the dog, the spirit suggested rather speciesistically as he toddled across the room. It must have been the dog, echoed Roberto, who picked up the mess and put the food in the refrigerator. Scrooge eyed the corpulent spirit with an unmasked disgust. If you don't have any respect for yourself, he sniffed, at least try to have some for others. All lighten up, man, it's Christmas Eve, said the spirit as he alternated bites of turkey leg with fistfuls of Chex Party Mist. And the bigger I am, the more of me there is to love. Ha! As Roberto walked back into the room, Mercedes said to him, I think I'm also depressed about how little money is coming in. Now, Mercedes, said Roberto comfortingly, don't fall into the trap of our materialistic culture. We have a roof over our heads, enough food, good friends, a loving child. Oh, Roberto, don't talk to me about traps. You're obviously ensnared in a ridiculous nobility and poverty concept that the bourgeois class generates to appease its own guilt. We're not virtuous paupers languishing in some Dickens novel. We've got bills to pay, and that ogre Scrooge refuses to pay you a fair wage. I'm trying my best to wreak anarchy at the office, explained Roberta. I'm striking back at Scrooge and his pocketbook by stealing photocopies and taking too long on coffee breaks. He and the heartless system he represents will come tumbling down before too long. Scrooge was taken aback. He had no idea that Roberto was so bitter, but then again, he rarely talked to his employee about anything in a frank way, and he knew almost nothing of his family life. But how does that help us? Asked Mercedes. How does that help diminutive Timon? With that huge deductible with that huge deductible required by Scrooge's miserable insurance coverage, we'll never be able to afford proper medical care for him. As if on cue, the vertically challenged pre-adult came into the room. Diminutive Timon was an amiable chap and full of boundless energy. In fact, the only trait that would set him apart from the others in his gender peer group was that this size did not conform to the average. He jumped onto the couch and hugged his caregivers, whose concerns melted away, if only momentarily. Scrooge's heart was touched by the little pre-adult. He turned and asked, This boy, diminutive Timon, what is the matter with him? Nobody knows. Nobody knows, Rupert said. His repeated willfulness and bursts of uncontrolled energy have everyone perplexed. At first, it was thought his behavior was a simple case of blocked chakras, but now his condition appears to be a birth-induced delayed trauma disorder. Scrooge was appalled. Are there no specialists? Are there no telephones for victims such as he? Don't call him a victim, Rupert said. He is merely a person living with a disorder. And telephones, well, they're a little infantilizing, you have to admit. Scrooge thought for a moment, then asked, Spirit, is his outlook so irretrievably bleak? The spirit of Christmas present looked him in the face. although his eyes were getting glassy. With bits of food dangling from his beard, he said, "If you'd spring for better coverage, you tightwad, at least they could pay for more tests and treatments." Properly chastened, Scrooge watched the family play together. How non-dysfunctional they were, even with Timon's affliction. Scrooge sadly envied their warmth and their positive, nurturing interaction. After a while, Bob announced it was time to toast the season. He got out the glasses of sparkling mineral water and passed them out to Mercedes and Timon. "A toast," he said, "to this festive season, and may the forces that placed us here, or not, continue to bless us." Timon raised his glass. "May a higher entity, if there is such a thing, bless everyone." They sipped in unison. Then Roberto raised his glass and said, "To Mr. Scrooge." Mercedes stopped and set down her glass. "Really, Roberto? Why spoil our celebration by mentioning him?" "You didn't let me finish," said Roberto. "To Mr. Scrooge, for so perfectly embodying the enemy of the working class. May he always inspire us to continue the fight." Mercedes laughed, and so did Timon. They all raised their glasses and drank, and their laughter and joy continued until the spirit slurringly announced it was time to move on. As the scene faded, Scrooge continued to stare, and especially kept his eye on diminutive Timon. The next sound Scrooge heard, besides the fairly regular moaning of the spirit of Christmas present, was the hearty laughter of his nephew. Soon Fred's cozy living room materialized around them, with all his guests who had come there to feast. "And so Uncle Scrooge just sat there," continued his nephew, "refusing to accept any of my good wishes for the season, and swatting away at the bugs on his desk." Everyone laughed heartily when picturing the kindness-impaired coffee distributor in such a scene, until, that is, one person in the group said icily, "I don't think cruelty to defenseless insects is all that funny." Fred's countenance changed to a concerned expression. "No, you're right. I'm sorry," he murmured. The spirit guffawed and saw something disparaging about the group's sexual adequacy, which they were lucky they couldn't hear. In fact, the spirit laughed so hard at his remark that he lost his balance and stumbled over a footstool with a heavy thump. Scrooge was by now supremely annoyed at the spirit's loutish behavior. "What's the deal with him?" he asked Rupert finally. "I haven't seen him drink anything." "It's a substance abuse problem," said the driver. "He thrives on the milk of human kindness, but sometimes he enjoys too much of it." "You got that right, Rupert, buddy," slurred the spirit as he pulled himself on Silly Tuesday. "And you know the old saying, you can't drink the milk of human kindness, you can only rent it. Excuse me a minute." The spirit staggered off, looking for relief. The mood of the celebrants picked up again when Fred's wife announced, "You'll all be happy to know that we managed to dissuade all the local retailers from carrying mistletoe this year. So let's drink a toast to the end of traditionally sanctioned sexual harassment." They all raised their glasses of non-alcoholic, low-fat, no cholesterol eggnog, all except one. "Sasha?" Fred asked of this person. "Is something wrong with the eggnog?" "You've forgotten," said Sasha quietly. "I'm a vegan." Fred's face went red. He mumbled numerous apologies and ran into the kitchen to prepare Sasha a beet juice spritzer. This slight error did not dampen everyone's spirits long, however, and the festiveness and generosity of the season soon returned. Good cheer and laughter filled the air at the expense of no individual person or group. Scrooge got quite caught up in the merrymaking and clapped and cheered gaily at the games and jests the celebrants enjoyed. Fred's guests played at optically inconvenienced person's bluff for a good long time, then enjoyed a lively round of 20 non-intrusive questions. Next, they worked at decorating their Yule tree in the most inclusive and equitable way imaginable. Oh, what fun they had, adorning it with Stars of David and menorahs, and Oriental dragons, and Shinto paper cranes, and stars and crescent moons, and dream catchers of all sizes. They hung holly clusters for the druids, talismans for the Wiccans, and yin yangs, ankhs, I Ching sticks, tarot cards, runestones, and all conceivable manner of symbols and mandalas. When they were finished, the tree stood gloriously and ecumenically arrayed. Next on the agenda were refreshments, and Fred's guests did eat well. They feasted on salads and casserole, fruits and nuts, and naturally sweetened pies and cookies, until they could find no more room inside themselves. To Scrooge's vexation, the spirit of Christmas present could not help remarking disdainfully on the fare, which was too healthful and delicate for his taste. While he pounded his fists and followed that he was starving, the guests heard not a word. Scrooge and the designated driver both noticed how the strong currents of goodwill were causing the spirit to act very erratically. After the spirit began to flail about and knocked a platter of baba ganoush on himself, Rupert led him out to the patio, where the fresh air would clear his head. To top off the feast, Fred brought out from the kitchen a steaming platter of low-fat latkes, with generous bowls of apple sauce and yogurt. Although everyone was full to bursting, they couldn't resist gobbling a few of the potato pancakes. As the guests settled down around the living room, Fred brought out a menorah he had purchased just that day and placed a candle in each of the 8 holes. He, rec- he recited what he knew about the Festival of Lights, which admittedly was very little, and lit all 8 candles, thus compressing a salute to Hanukkah to fit into their busy evening. Next, Fred brought out a straw mat and placed it under the menorah. Now it's time for our Kwanzaa celebration, he announced. You'll please forgive me for using the menorah again, but I didn't have time to find a proper kinara at the store. So the guests quickly honored the Guz- Guzo Saba, or Seven Principles, while Fred led them in song and mangled the Swahili words he read from his Kwanzaa manual. They then cleared the table for their celebration of Diwali for their guests of the Hindu persuasion. By the time the overstuffed pinatas were brought out for the next phase of the party, Scrooge had walked out to the patio to look for his 2 astro guides. Out in the cold December air, he spied the spirit of Christmas present, flat on his back, making hooting noises and laughing at his own private jokes. So where are we off to next? Asked Scrooge. Our time with you is almost at an end, Rupert said. After the spirit gets this full of the milk of human kindness, any further travel tends to be counterproductive, not to mention embarrassing. The spirit had begun singing Deck the Halls loudly, substituting fa la 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 for all the lyrics he was forgetting. Practically all of them, it turned out. Scrooge asked hopefully, Then my re-education over? Have I not been visited by 3 spirits tonight? Rupert said, I'm not really a spirit of the season, just a concerned observer. You still have one more spirit to meet. Rupert took the hands of the prostrate spirit and began to drag him away. As they left, the scene changed, and Scrooge found himself standing in the middle of a cold, lonely plain, with another spectre of gloomy visage walking toward him out of the murk. And that's all. Next time, we will meet the third spirit.